Police officers of Reddit, what is the funniest arrest you have made on the job? I don't mean to start any trouble here, but one of my former employees was ex-Navy SEAL ex-LAPD. He told me that folk on PCP was the worst. He laughed about a couple arrests about people on drugs, but had terrible memories of people on PCP. Mostly due to the nature that an athletic man on large amounts of PCP cannot be subdued by traditional force like tasers, and will have greatly increased violent strength. He said more than once that people on PCP holding weapons would be gripping them so tight that their own hands were bleeding and they wouldn't know it. However, he said his favorite was a naked man running around in clown shoes. Mostly because his fat partner at the time couldn't catch him for the life of him, and it was a fat cop chasing a high naked man running in clown shoes. Well, I wasn't arrested, I was actually given a ride home as the cops laughed their ass off in the front seat. The story goes I was at a party and decided to get way drunker than usual. My last memory was on the dance floor with a bottle of goose. What happened next I still don't know, but somehow I ended up in the next state over. Completely passed out in the local park with a bunch of fish in a bag. No idea what the FCK happened, but my phone was dead and I had no money left and one shoe was painted red and the other blue. Some cops saw me and asked what I was doing and I said I have no idea and where was I. They were like Maine and I was like, how the FCK did I get here? They laughed and asked where I lived and were nice enough to drive me an hour home. They basically just made fun of me the whole way home, but I mean it beat getting arrested. With my uncle being a deputy, I get to hear pretty funny stories. My favorite is that one time he was working a second job as security at a movie theater and these older looking kids came in screaming about to fight. So he broke them up and sent them to their movies. After the movie they come out and start trying to fight again. So my uncle told them to either get off the property or get arrested, so they all leave. Not even 5 minutes later one of the kids comes in crying. Got punched in the face and got a broken nose. As soon as the kid reached my uncle, the kid that punches him comes running up and tries to punch the kid again, almost punching my uncle in the face. So out of instinct he punched the kid in the nose. So he arrests the kid for assault. Takes him to juvie. The kid was yelling that his nose hurt. Medics looked at it. Broken nose. An officer comes and asks my uncle if he had punched the 12-year-old kid. Long story short, my uncle accidentally punched a 12-year-old kid in the face, not realizing he was that young. My father was a police officer and this happened back in the late 80s, early 90s. They kept getting called to this woman's apartment who was claiming that while she was sleeping at night, the devil would come out of her closet. She was in her 60s and lived alone. And they just assumed she was a little wacky. Each time a call would come, they would go there, look around, find no devil, and leave. Finally one day, after about the 5th call, my dad and his partner are poking around in the woman's closet and notice what looks like a trapdoor type thing in the back. They push it and it opens up into the closet of the apartment next door. In that guy's closet, hanging up is a devil costume. This guy had been dressing up in his devil costume, crawling into the woman's closet, popping out and scaring her, and scurrying back into the closet before the cops got there. Edit. SP. A story my dad told me. Not an arrest, but it nearly was. So he used to be a police officer in Northern Ireland, and back in the 90s there are certain areas you wouldn't go if you weren't from that area. So he's out on patrol and they're sitting in a Land Rover at a junction and they see a group of about 10 men standing at a street corner looking a bit suspicious but not doing much at all. Then they see these 2 elderly Asian men walking up the street and the group of men notice them and start towards the 2 old guys. Rough area outside of Belfast and 2 foreigners walking about is a bad idea, so the group of 10 men are trying to start trouble with them and one of the guys throws a punch and the 2 old Asian men went to town on the guys. They took down all 10 of the scumbags. Turns out they were in Belfast for a martial arts conference and were just out walking around. The 2 Asian guys walk away and then my dad and another police officer get out to check and make sure the other guys are okay. They are really banged up. Broken noses and arms. They ask them if they want to call an ambulance and the guys spit at them and call them pigs, then limp away, so they just leave them to it and get back in their Land Rover. As a police officer of 19 years, I've seen a few amazing things. About 5 years ago we caught a serial flasher who looked and dressed exactly like 80s Prince. We spotted him in a place where he had been going regularly for quite a while. He would stand on top of a canal bridge and expose himself to people going under the bridge on barges. As soon as he did it, we got out the vehicle and rushed towards him. He spotted us immediately, ran down onto the canal side, and we followed after him on foot. Anyway, we slightly lose track of him, but there's only one way he can go, so we kept going. Eventually, and again, bear in mind he looked and dressed extremely similar to Prince, we see him sat down holding a fishing rod pretending to fish, hopelessly attempting to blend in with a pair of confused fishermen. I didn't make this arrest, but I prosecuted the case. Back when I was a federal prosecutor. Bank robbery in Pasadena. During the high tide of LA bank robberies, gangbangers used to rob banks in Pasadena and hop on the Pasadena freeway to speed home. They called it the 211 Express, penal code for robbery. Anyway, sometime in the mid-90s, some bangers robbed a bank on Fair Oaks. Surveillance cameras caught them. When I caught the case to prosecute, I got a nice folder of stills from the surveillance. One sequence showed a lil banger trying to hop over one of the waist-high swinging doors between the public area and the teller area. Problem was that he was wearing his pants sagged, and they were coming off, and they came most of the way off during his attempted hop, foiling his hop and causing his lower legs to hit the low door and causing him to pitch forward with his pants around his knees. The camera perfectly captured the sequence. His expression followed from defiance to concern to oh shit as the pants came off and he hit the door. Pretty sure he pled guilty just to avoid me showing those pics to the jury. One of my uncle's stories from Australia: NSW Highway Patrol. Guy doing 180 kilometers on the local highway, 80 km limit. When pulled over, his excuse was he'd just bought 2 Breaky McMuffins and had one on the dash in front of the speedo so he couldn't see how fast he was going. Also, Ron White arrested for drunk in public. I didn't want to be drunk in public. I wanted to be drunk in a bar. They threw me into public. Arrest them. This one comes from my cousin's husband. He told me this story a few years ago now, so I've recreated some of the less important details as best I could. He and a few fellow officers were responding to a disturbance at a house, and they eventually ended up with a suspect hiding. They knew he was there the whole time, from them under a porch that he'd pulled the lattice off of. He won't come out, and nobody wants to risk going in to get him. So they call the K9 unit. K9 shows up, and the cop yells, "Come on out. K9's here. And if you don't come out, we'll send in the dog." Double quote. This brilliant bastard responds, "Fine. Asshole. Send in the dog. I'll bite it." Double quote. Well, the dog won. I'm not a cop, and this is not an arrest. But my college had an officially dry campus, which in reality translates into a lot of relatively subtle dorm and house parties, and hordes of drunken students wandering the streets walking between them. One of the freshmen in the class below me joined this tradition, but got lost as he looked for his dorm. Trying to orient himself, he staggered up to a large, official-looking building, and asked if it was the main building on campus. It was the town jail, where the police were happy to lock him up until he sobered up, and nice enough not to charge him with anything. My grandfather, a retired police sergeant, has a great story. One night when he was on patrol, he got a call of a break-in near his location. So he went to go check it out. He gets to the house and sees this guy holding a stereo climbing out the window backwards. My grandpa decides to have some fun. He creeps up behind the guy and screams, "Do motherfucker." The dude drops the stereo and literally shits himself. He gets arrested and taken in, with sheets in his pants. Sometimes I get bored and listen to the dispatch radio for my county. One day while listening they started saying something like suspect took a right down 3rd, so I thought that there might be a chance that it was my street. Ran downstairs. Out to that front porch to watch for a car chance. A few minutes pass when I'm about to give up and go inside when I hear sirens. About a minute later, I see a guy in boxers on a horse going down the street followed by a couple officers on foot and a car. Turns out, there was a drug house disguised as a farm that breeds horses just out of town. There was a drug raid and the guy ran on one of the horses. My friend is a cop and she told me the funniest story the other day. She got a call about a disturbance at a convenience store. She arrived to find a naked man yelling at the clerk. The naked guy saw her and ran. He didn't get far before she pepper sprayed him. I forget why she had to. I think he started getting aggressive towards her. Well, he dropped like a dead fish screaming from the pepper spray. She handcuffed him face down. And backup arrived and started to spray something in his eyes to relieve the pepper spray pain. He immediately rolled over and spread his legs screaming, "Get my junk. Get my junk." Double quote. I got stopped by the cops in the park by my house once. I was with about 6 friends smoking and drinking. We were also playing Grounders. Grounders is a game where one person closes their eyes and all the other have to stay off the ground and not get caught. The person can call Grounders if they think someone has started walking on the ground and that person is it. Or someone is caught, then they are it. So as we are deciding who will be it first, 2 cop cruisers turn into the park and drive towards us, at which time we decide to run. The cop car is chasing me and my friend behind me. Very close to us, so I stopped. I didn't have ID on me or anything, but I did have my business cards for my company. I proceeded to tell the officer, who was laughing at my hysterically, that we play tag in the park at night since children play there during the day and they straddled us. He said he would give us the same lecture he gave 14-year-olds. Had me call all my friends back and let us go even though 2 people were on house arrest. The second cop picked up one of the other friends who decided to sit on a bench on the other side of the park. Lol, she said we should have ran more, she could have used the exercise. My friend's dad is a cop. He loves to tell us stories. My favorite is about an attempted suicide. Officer dad friend got a call about an attempted suicide early in the morning. He got to the scene and found a woman who had tried to shoot herself in the head with a rifle. She survived, but needed medical attention badly. As the ambulance took her away, he checked the house to see if anyone else was home. He found a boy, about 10 years old, still asleep. As he woke up, rubbing his eyes, he asked, "Did my mom try to kill herself?" Double quote. Yeah. She tried to use a rifle on herself. She's on her way to the hospital. Double quote. Well, can I have some breakfast? Double quote. Edit. I guess it's a bit more sad than funny. He tells it much better than I do. I was a rookie on the force and had started my afternoon shift. I was on the parkway heading to my patrol route when I came upon a horrible accident. I got out of my squad car and went to help. What I found was a man with a severed arm writhing in pain and near unconsciousness. He was in shock, but his severed arm was nearby and I knew there was a chance of saving it. The ambulance was on the way, but time is of the essence in situations like this. A civilian nearby said he wanted to help, so me being the rookie I checked his trunk and wrapped the severed arm in a blanket and told him to meet me at the trauma unit at the hospital 2 exits down. He rushed ahead of me while I waited for the ambulance to arrive and load up the wounded man. I then raced to the hospital's trauma unit and asked the doctors if a man came in recently with a severed arm from a car accident wrapped in a blanket. To my chagrin, however, they told me no such man had arrived. It was my first case of armed robbery. That's all I got, folks. Take care. In all seriousness, a retired cop told me this. They're actually pretty funny when they're not beating me to a pulp. Got dispatched out to a house for a loud noise complaint assault one night. The short version of the story is the husband was watching porn on the computer and the wife asked him to go into the bedroom for sexy time. He told her he wasn't in the mood and kept scrolling through porn. She tried to get frisky with him and he pushed her away. She was drunk and got all pissed off and started screaming and yelling and went into the bedroom. While she was in there she found his spank bank mags which were all about big breasted Latino girls. She is a fat white girl. She gets pissed off thinking he isn't interested in her and comes back into the living room while he is still surfing porn and starts to hit him with the porn mags and slapping him. Even gave him a black eye. He, not wanting to hit a woman, leaves the living room, grabs the porn mag from her and goes into the bedroom and locks the door. Needless to say she got taken away that night. Not a cop. But my father once got into a foot chase versus a car. And managed to win. He was police Olympic runner. And was only a second or two off a sprinter for the Olympics. Dad chased the car over a 13-block area and beat the dude, who was charged with molesting his stepdaughter, to the bridge to another state. Helps that my dad was a sprinter jumper. He went through the backyards as the dude slipped into his car. His partner chased behind the guy in the car. Dad caught him on the main drag of the town. Pistol pointed directly at them. Fired one shot into the engine block and the dude stopped. Dude was going to run my dad down. Not the funniest but easily the most baddest story I have of my father. Except for when he ran into a burning hotel and saved 42 people. When I was younger, me and my friends went to a house party that was on the top floor of a 4-story apartment. The guards came and arrested most of us for drinking underage. BTW, the guy's parents were not there. So me and my 3 friends tried escaping by climbing onto a roof, which was really dodgy because we were all really drunk. We got away safely, but my friend jumped onto the 3-story balcony for some retarded reason and was stuck there. They had to call the fire brigade to get him down and it cost €300. Sorry, my writing is terrible. Not a cop. Just security. Guarding apartment complex in a rather shady part of town. Pretty boring with the random WTF moments. Friday night. The residents have been generally quiet. Then I hear yelling coming from the front of the complex, about a 4-acre size group of buildings. Start getting closer and hear a lot of yelling in Spanish. Then see one guy come down the stairs. Get in his car and tear off. I start walking up to the apartment. On the way up, passing a Latin guy who was passed out. Get there. Realize it's a particular group that doesn't like me or the other security. They won't give me a straight answer. So I go to check on passed out guy. I give him a shake and he won't move. Try to get him up a couple times. And when he doesn't move, call my supervisor. He shows up. And we decide to call the cops. Since he needs to go elsewhere. When the cops show up, we start talking with them. While we are, guy just wakes up on his own. The cops have called the EMTs to check the guy out. And the EMT starts working on him. Apparently drunk, he didn't like it and swings on the EMT. Which gets him handcuffed and laying on the sidewalk. Well, while he's laying there, he starts demanding that we call immigration to come get him. He also proceeds to start kicking. So it took 2 cops, my boss and me, to get the leg cuffs on him. We put him in the back of the cruiser and he leaves. Weirdest night I've ever had doing security. I'm an army MP. When I was a wee private, I apprehended, we don't say arrest, a drunken disorderly first sergeant in a downtown city in Germany. On our way back to the station, he shat his pants and all over the backseat of my patrol car. He cried. I laughed. Then ordered him to clean up his own sheet, with the blessing of my desk sergeant and supervisor, upon arrival. He did it. Best part was seeing that guy around post as we were on a very small installation. He was so drunk. I'm not sure if he really remembered that I was the one who apprehended him. Or if I might have been part of some weird drunken nightmare haze. I'm not a cop. But this was the talk of the town for a few weeks. Middle of December. 4 days before Christmas. Hick decides to get all sorts of messed up on some kind of drug. He strips naked. Walks 5 miles in the snow to the supermarket. Breaks in. Throw boxes and stuff everywhere. And breaks into the manager's office. At this point, he decides to put on some sort of clothing, so he puts on the manager's rain boots and coats himself in chocolate syrup and peanut butter. Then he passes out. That's how the cops found him the next morning. I can only wonder what that arrest was like. Edit. Somehow posted an MTG link. Edit. Spelled peanut. My dad, an ex-NYPD sergeant, was working with his partner in a fairly Jewish part of Brooklyn, Borough Park, where GTAs and robberies were common since the criminals wouldn't rob the poor people in their neighborhood but rather the rich ones with Mercedes-Benz E-classes. There was a string of armed robberies in delis and grocery stores lately, and my father had responded to a robbery in progress of a Key Food or some other grocery store. See Town. Walbombs. I live in the other side of Brooklyn. FCK if I know, in the late 80s. The guys make a break for it as my dad and his partner show up. My dad chases one down into an apartment complex. He slowly enters this place with one exit and turns a corner with his S&W 38 on point, and the guy is hiding in a corner. Upon seeing him, this large burly 6'4" black male fucking shrieked and fainted. When his partner arrived with backup, they all figured my dad, a barrel-chested 6-foot Irishman, put the smack down on this robber and he was investigated. Boring night on patrol. Heard a call to the FD about a man stuck in a hot tub. I had to see how a man could be stuck in a hot tub. You guessed it. Penis stuck in the filter suction tube. FD had to cut out the filter pipe to transport the gentleman to the ER. Picture a 2 feet section of plastic pipe sticking up from the gunny. Hilarious. No. There is no law against having sex with a hot tub. Turns out he has several outstanding warrants for failure to appear. Goes to jail after the docs remove his tool from the pipe. Bad night for him. Great night for us.